I'm so excited about my guest today. It's Laura Baldwin with OReilly Media. I have known about OReilly Media for it seems like my whole life. That's not quite true because it hasn't been around that long. But Tim O'Reilly started this thing and it's been such a force in the technology industry and in fact on all of our lives as a result of that. And I am very eager to hear from Laura both about how OReilly has evolved and also her views. We're going to talk a lot today about sort of the impact, both individual and from a more meta standpoint, the impact of the Great Resignation on us and on our businesses. So Laura, I'll just switch over so that you are now, here we go, joining us. Again, welcome. I'm so glad you're here. And let's just start with that. Just tell me, I know you've been at OReilly for quite a while. Maybe you could talk about what you've seen in terms of an evolution, both there and maybe in the publishing industry.
Mm-hmm. So thank you so much for having me, Karen. I'm thrilled to be talking to you, and I love talking about OReilly. I've been with the company for 20 years. I just hit my 20-year anniversary in September, so I've seen it through a lot and led it through a lot, and I think that some of the way OReilly has evolved over the past 20 years is in line exactly with what's happening in the economy and society in general. We started out as a publishing company, and we were publishing books, and those books, that iconic animal brand is still super important in the world. It means a lot to people. I used to love when people came up to me and said, "Oh, I learned how to code on OReilly books," or "I built my startup on OReilly books." And Tim O'Reilly's famous line was, "Oh, and they made millions and we made $35. So
That's great.
So what we're all about is spreading the knowledge of innovators. We believe if we spread that knowledge, we can make the world a better place. We're a very mission-driven company, and that has not changed in the 20 years that I've been here. We still see that, and it's still something that gives us a lot of pride around our customers. But what's evolved is the way that they take in that information. I've always said we were publishers, but that's not what we do. We actually curate and develop information. The book itself is nothing but a distribution mechanism for us to deliver that knowledge. We are now delivering it online in a very different and much more digital way as part of the OReilly Learning Platform. The core of the company, the heart of who we are, editorial, bringing innovation to the market, that is still what we do. It's just taken a different distribution form. Yeah. And so we're very much the same company we always were, very mission driven. And again, now we're just delivering it digitally.
Wow, that's great. I'm sure that I have a few of those $35 books, which seemed very expensive at the time, on my shelf. Yeah, O'Reilly's just played such a large part in many lives. I just want to spend just a few minutes. Maybe you could say about your career at O'Reilly. Obviously, you didn't come in as president. You sort of grew your way into that. Could you talk a little bit about your tenure there?
Sure. I started as the CFO. I actually came in as a turnaround specialist. O'Reilly was having some financial trouble back in the early 2000s, like every other company was at the time. You know, there was stock market hits and all of that stuff going on at the time. I started as the CFO, and we started to go through a transformation back then to change who we were as a company. Within 2 years, Tim asked me to become the COO as well. And that was when I took responsibility for our book publishing programs. So that was like in 2003. And then in 2011, I became O'Reilly's first president, where Tim actually took a much higher, sort of more chairman of the board, CEO type role. And I started running the company day to day. So it's been a process over the last 20 years, but the bulk of our transformation, especially our big digital transformation, happened from 2015 and 16 through today. So I've led a lot of the big changes that have taken us to be who we are today.
Yeah, that's great. And also you must have formed quite a partnership, right? It's not just the company, it's the brand. And you must have had quite a partnership with Tim to do that.
And Tim, but also the staff in general. The two women who run our editorial programs are just brilliant. Our head of marketing, our CFO. I think that in any leadership role, you have to understand that you're part of a team, whether that be with your CEO, like Tim, and we both have very different skill sets, as I do with the rest of the members of our exec team. And I think that's important from a leadership perspective. You've got to know, like, you need to fill in your own gaps with people that are better than you. And I'm really proud of that team that we built at O'Reilly.
Wonderful. Congrats on that. And obviously a strong team to have made it through all of the ups and downs of the industry over these many years. So congrats.
Exactly.
Yeah. So let's talk about what may be both an up and a down in the world and the industry today, and that is the Great Resignation. I know you have some very specific views, and by the way, this is again just part of what I love about O'Reilly is you're all about what are the trends, what's going on in the world, and then let's deliver to support that. So of course you have big views about what's going on in the world.
I do. Every newspaper you open, every article you read is about the Great Resignation, and it is framed from the individual perspective. The Wall Street Journal just did an article the other day about, raises this year are going up to be about 3.9%, and individuals have to negotiate for bigger dollars. What I see happening that has me concerned is the framing of it from an individual perspective is important because it's the individuals leaving or creating that hole. But what it's doing is it's destabilizing companies. And the effect of what I call the Great Destabilization is not going to be seen for a matter of months, if not longer. So when you read articles that say 25%, 1 in 4, I believe is what the Wall Street Journal quoted the other day, people are thinking of leaving their jobs. 25% turnover in a company, even 10% turnover in a company affects your product roadmap. It affects your sales and your ability to go to market. It affects your marketing and the stories you're telling about what you can accomplish. It affects your brand because people think, oh, you have people leaving. What's wrong with you? And while it's all of everything out there has been framed around the individuals leaving, I think what we're going to see happen in the economy is a real drag on innovation and productivity that's going to hit as we head toward the end of 2022 and into 2023. Because you can't lose that many people without it having an impact. And you said something I think really important, which is O'Reilly is trying to pay attention to that. And what does that mean? It means that as organizations, we're trying to make our platform be the whole that will allow you to make sure that your people are cross-trained, that you have people at the ready when somebody leaves. And I think that that's the switch that we have to start talking about is how do companies restabilize in the midst of people leaving?
I love that framework of stabilization, restabilization, because without exception, all of my clients who are high-tech, hyper-growth companies have, probably altogether hundreds and hundreds of jobs they're trying to fill right now that they can't fill. Plus, they're needing to backfill from people leaving, going literally 30%, 50% increases in salary, and they weren't paid what I would say low on the scale to begin with, but there's such incentive now because people are hiring, and it's sort of an inflation, if you will, inflation in salaries. So you can't fault someone for leaving for that sort of a pay raise, but it does leave a giant hole. My specialty is teamwork and leadership, and when you have someone leave a team, or someone's, as is frequently happening, that team loses a lot of its ability to be effective. So I'm curious, as you started to go into, how do you think organizations should address this?
Yeah. So, well, first off, I want to say, your point about people leaving for more money. The fact is, look at O'Reilly. We're a mid-size, multi-million-dollar company, but we're very mid-size. So those people that are leaving to take $30,000 and $40,000 increases are going to much larger organizations or well-funded startups where they don't have to manage their bottom line as carefully as a self-funded mid-sized company like O'Reilly. And so I think the first thing about the Great Resignation is that companies have to be really very clear on their value proposition and what that value proposition is to their employees. Because we are not Microsoft, we are not Google, we are not AWS, we are not going to be able to put the kind of dollars in that they would. And I think as a company, it's your job to be competitive. Your salaries have to be competitive, but you can't play that game. And most mid-sized companies right now, the struggle is that they can't play that game. So making sure you're really aware of what your value proposition is so that your employees can really feel it and that your mission really is driven through everything you do, I think is critical. The first part of that is super critical in terms of why people stay has to be just as important as why they leave.
Yes, people will self-select right into the environment that they want to work in. Sometimes I'd say the value proposition holds water when an employee gets there, and so you would see quick turnover because of that. But if you have a compelling value proposition and you attract, then it's just easier to retain people because they are so bought into the mission of what you're trying to do.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm also remembering that the number one reason that people leave is their manager, right? Study after study have shown that. And so I think there's all sorts of strategies that organizations can use to make sure that they're not getting in their own way in terms of retention, right? That that they're doing all the things that would retain and none of the things that would repel.
Yeah.
And that it just has to be a higher and higher level of priority for an organization to pay attention to that. Yeah.
I think the way O'Reilly does that, one of the first things I did when I became president was work with our exec team to develop a set of operating principles. And they're open. Anybody can Google them, O'Reilly Media Operating Principles. And we use those to help sort of drive and define how we work, how we manage the things that are important to us as a company. Things like, know your numbers and the things that we expect from our employees, but also what matters to us. Our number one operating principle is it best for the company? Is it best for the customer? Not the customer is always right, but is it best for the customer? So whether you're a manager or a line employee, you always know that that's the thing O'Reilly cares about the most. So that helps define who we are as a company and how our managers operate within the company.
Yeah. And what and how do you suggest that organizations take care of the one other thing that I think is important in that area, which is that employees are able to see the impact of their work on that most important value for the organization?
Yeah, I mean, for us, people can see the impact of their work because we work in small teams and, they see everything they do drives to our product roadmap. We're a SaaS company. So it's very apparent because the work we're doing inside the company is very it translates directly into features that our customers see. And so we get that constant feedback. People know basically even through our growth rates, which are incredible right now, and our renewal rates, that what we're doing has impact and really matters to people. And I think that, we do these quarterly all hands meetings where we take everybody through very openly how we're succeeding and failing against our goals. And I think the company's got to be clear about that. And as leaders, we owe it to our employees to tell them the truth. And sometimes the truth hurts and we're not meeting our goals, and sometimes we are. But if you're not transparent about it, then people don't know how their work impacts the outcome. And I agree with you. I think that matters.
Exactly. And they don't know when you're not meeting their goals what they need to be doing differently if you're not transparent about that. So otherwise they'll just keep doing the same thing and you'll keep getting the same results, which in that sort of situation is
we took the company a few years ago through the radical Candor training.
Sure. And, love that.
And it was really, really positive. We eliminated 5 years ago, I think it was 5 or 6 years ago, we eliminated written reviews. We believe in continuous feedback. And, I want to be honest, sometimes we get it really right and sometimes we don't. I can't promise that every single person is doing it exactly as we would like, but we really try. And I think that that's the number one thing a company can do. I think the concept of continual feedback is really important. And that feedback comes not just as feedback to help you do better, but also when you do well. Saying thank you goes a long way.
Yeah.
Truly appreciating what they do really goes a long way in helping retain your employees too.
Yeah. Agreed. And for those that aren't familiar with Radical Candor, it's really basically a 2x2 matrix put out by Kim Scott, which looked at do you care enough to give candid feedback? And I'll say candid, useful feedback, right? Not to fall into being obnoxiously aggressive, but not to be so worried about being nice and not hurting someone's feelings that you don't give them the feedback that they want. And we know the best feedback is given close to the moment when things happen, so that the employee can do something about it, as opposed to getting feedback 6 months later on their performance review. And applaud you for having that sort of a program. Any performance review formal should just be a summary of the continuous work that's gone on throughout the year.
Yeah.
So
I mean, the real reason we started it, I remember there was one year, it was several years ago, probably 6 or 7 years ago, and I was looking at some of the layered down reviews, like the director level reviews, and I was hearing that employees were surprised by what was in their written review. That is not okay.
Agreed.
So the way to eliminate surprise is to eliminate the process.
Yeah.
And put a new one in. And again, like I said, sometimes, we really try. It doesn't mean we always hit the nail on the head, but we try.
Yeah. And how about support for remote employees, which is another big shift we've gone through the past few
Yeah.
years?
So we're super fortunate. So we actually, Andrew Odawan, who is our CTO, and Adam Whitwer, who is our VP of product, we did a massive investment in this transition to be a SaaS company years ago. And at the time, we made the decision that we were going to hire remote engineers. We were not going to worry about where people sat, because to us, it's the value you bring to the company, not the location you're at, that matters. So another thing we could talk about, Karen, I'm a big proponent of, I don't believe in geo pay. I think that you pay for value. You don't pay for what state people sit in, especially in the US. But they made the decision that we were going to go remote. We did that in 2017 and 18. So we were a little bit ahead of the game. We had the tools in place to be able to be a remote company. And our engineering and product teams that have driven much of our transformation to be the SaaS business we are today actually came from the leadership of product and engineering. So we have always tried to support remote. O'Reilly actually went fully remote in 2021. We made the decision. We did a huge survey amongst our team, and 90% of our employees wanted to go remote. But we were a big believer in allowing people to put their family first and to deal with flexibility well ahead of the pandemic. So to be honest, I felt very lucky that we had a team that was insightful enough to do it ahead of time, because I know a lot of my friends had to deal with it after the fact, after the pandemic hit, and we were already set up to work that way.
Yeah, that's great. And so did you let all of your office space go?
We did. We had not all of it. So we still have our space in Sebastopol, California, which is our headquarters, but people are not really going in there. We let our Boston office space go for now. We do have a WeWork facility where people can come in when they need to, or to do small meetings. But right now we're really fully remote, and we're trying to make that really work for us.
Yeah.
So far, our results show that it's working. And when I talk to our employees, they seem happy. But we are fortunate. Again, I don't want to profess that we did something amazing during the pandemic. We just kept the values we've always had: flexibility, put your family first, and we were able to carry that forward with us. So, when I talked earlier about you've got to know your value proposition, for O'Reilly, it hasn't really changed. So I don't want to say like, oh, we've done something great during the pandemic to go remote, because we were already in that direction.
Yeah. Well, it's certainly, however difficult it was, it would have been more difficult to have to do it under the cloud of a pandemic. So, so I have to ask the question of, how has O'Reilly been impacted by the Great Resignation, given all the efforts that you've put into being a value-based company and keeping your workforce engaged?
Yeah, I'll be very honest with you. I actually, at our last all hands meeting, I took everybody through our retention rates, which we've lost about 6% of our staff through as part of the Great Resignation, which is actually a pretty low number when I hear compared to what other companies are going through. But I took our company through it, and here's what our stats are. They are mostly concentrated, however, in engineering, which is where we're seeing the biggest salary adjustments right now happening as part of the Great Resignation. So to that team, I'm sure it feels like a little bit more.
Of course.
But our net is only about 6%. So we're heading for us, it's been a fairly positive. I shouldn't say this. It hasn't been negative the way it has affected other companies. That doesn't mean it's not going to happen. But I took the company through. So what about us? What are we going to do about it? And I put up a slide that was like, here's the things that we're going to do. And we're not changing. What I said to them is, we're going to do what we've always done. We're going to be mission driven. We're going to have competitive salaries. I'm not going to promise the company that we are going to be able to compete when large organizations can throw dollars that we can't throw. So we've got to make sure that everything else we do matters and matters to employees. And that goes from giving them career paths to making sure that, we have people in place that, can help when you need flexibility. And that's what we try to do. It's what we've always tried to do. So I feel proud that as an organization, we haven't had to change our values around what's happening now. We're just going to double down on them.
Yeah. All right. I want to come back to career pathing, but first I'd like to ask anyone who's watching, if you want to ask some questions, you can put them in the Q&A in the chat box, and hopefully they will come through to me if they do some questions. And if not, we can circle back on those at a later date. So around career pathing, what do you do internally? And then how does O'Reilly as an organization support that for other companies?
So first thing, from O'Reilly's perspective, everyone used to laugh at me. I have a program I call PLOPS, It stands for people with lots of potential. And it's very informal right now, but what it means is, like, as managers, it's our job to make sure that people that we see that have potential are actually given opportunities to run projects or to be part of really important teams that are doing really important work, to make sure we're giving them opportunities to expand their talent. And I think that is first and foremost on career pathing, is that it's our job as leaders to make sure that the people we see that really want it are put in an opportunity to excel and to earn it. And so that to me is the number one thing when it comes to career pathing, right? Is paying attention to people's skill sets and what they want to do. And that's that radical candor conversation. Where do you want to go? What do you want to be? And helping them get there. I'm a huge proponent of promote from within. I think it's incredibly important. I think we did 71 promotions last year for a company that is only, a little less at the time than 400 people, now heading to 500. I feel like that's a pretty decent number and a lot higher than most companies do. So that concept of giving people a path is important. But when I talk about career paths, it's one of the things I promised the company in our last meeting. We're going to try to formalize it more. Julie Barron, who runs one of our leaders in our product team, has actually written some great documents about, okay, as an associate product manager, here's what you do. And this is the skills you need to get to product manager. And here's what you need to become a senior product manager. And here's what you need to become a principal. I think documenting and putting that in writing, our engineering team has done some of that work as well, is really important. And now that our growth is exponential and we've got huge investment going into this year, I want to formalize that for the whole company to make sure that everybody knows, like, what are the skills you need to build? When we sit and talk to our customers, our sales team under Jerry Roach has done an amazing job about sitting down with our customers and saying, what are your goals as a company? How can we help you meet your goals? So when we have a company that says to us, we need to figure out AI, we make sure that we help them using our platform build the skills that they need to build in that particular area. And I think that that's critical. We can't just say, here's the O'Reilly Learning Platform, take it and run with it. We have to know what each company is trying to achieve, and they all have very different goals. And our customer success teams and our sales teams do a brilliant job of really honing in on what a customer needs and helping them get the right playlist, the right courses, the right live online trainings that are going to help their people build the skills that are part of the goals they have as an organization.
Yeah, wow. So I'm just curious, beyond AI, I'm sure you have a giant catalog, but what are maybe the most popular areas that companies seem to be interested in now?
Security has become very, very important. And with everything that's happening around GDPR and, people hacking into systems, security has become very, very important. AI is such a broad umbrella. What we really see is a lot of machine learning, people really trying to understand machine learning. And then, of course, cloud. And the thing about cloud that I think is so important is, the cloud has democratized AI for a lot of companies, right? Like a mid-sized company like O'Reilly with heading toward 500 employees may not be able to go out and hire the AI engineers at the salaries that a Google or a Microsoft or an AWS can. But what they're using those people for is to build and democratize AI into the cloud. So AutoML, for example, you don't need someone on your staff anymore who knows how to use it. You need someone on your staff who knows how to deploy it because it's already written in to the cloud services from the cloud providers. So we've seen that switch. And I think that it's really important. And we try to focus on that and pay attention to that so that all companies can take advantage of the democratization that's happening via the cloud.
Yeah. Wow. What's next for O'Reilly? I mean, you've talked about where you've come from, sort of this sort of interesting and very exciting soup that you're in the middle of now. Where are you headed?
Where are we headed? I always think that from a corporate perspective, your brand plan needs to be focused on your customers. So we're always headed where they're headed. And we definitely try to stay ahead of the market. It's one of the things that we're known for at O'Reilly. We're thinking now sort of beyond the cloud. What happens when robotics take over? What happens to people's jobs when automation hits? Our editorial team is really thinking about automation and what that's going to mean for companies. And so we're going to stay on top, just like we always have, of what is happening and make sure that our programs line up with the needs of greater society and the economy as a whole. We actually call it, Tim called it once, the next economy.
The
Like
next economy.
making sure we're ahead, what's coming next so that we can stay ahead of it. So we're not 100% sure what's coming next, but we sure know we're going to try to figure it out and follow it.
You have your eyes wide open to
do.
see what it is. That's
We
great.
do, and we have an amazing editorial team that really does that. They really keep their ear to the ground when it comes to what is really happening in the tech space.
Terrific. So one last question for you. The tagline for my business is up and to the right, because that's where we always want to go on that 2x2 matrix. If you think back on your career as a leader, was there a moment when you knew that your career was moving in that direction?
I'm not sure if it was a moment. I think that everybody should approach their career from the perspective of, are you making a difference, and are the things you do, do they matter? And I think if you're not in a job where you're feeling that every day, you should leave.
Yeah.
And I felt that every day in every role I ever had. And I never thought I would stay 20 years with a company. But every single day at O'Reilly, I feel like I'm making a difference, both in the lives of customers and employees and myself. I feel challenged every day. I think that that's the sign of growing your career, because the challenges you feel that you rise to the occasion, that helps you build your career. And so it's not some one thing that you do that says, hey, I'm on the right track. It's the things you do every day that sort of deliver on the promise of your own career. And you can never give up on that. You got to make sure that you're always pushing yourself and always challenging yourself. You know, companies can have promote from within strategies and have, career pathing, but it's still up to the individual. You have to want it. You have to go after it. And I feel like from my perspective, I've just always had that hunger. So my sort of what I would say there is, if that hunger is there, challenge yourself every day. You'll be amazed what you can do.
Yeah. Well, no surprise why you've been successful, Laura. That's really wonderful. I think I would say that in a way of, it's about having enough respect for yourself that you don't allow yourself to stay in a job where those things are not happening for you. And if you are, now is a great time to find a place where your values can be aligned and you can do work that makes a difference. So it has been an absolute pleasure to have you here. I am thrilled to have met you. Thank you so much for your time. We'll just sign off now by saying take good care. And thanks again to all those who watched.
Thanks for having me.